On a warm Friday evening, Sabina Nessa planned to meet her friends at a pub. It was only an 8-minute walk from home, and without an arrangement with them or on her own, the girl would never have thought of going there. And in that case, that walk wouldn't have had such dire consequences. What happened on that walk, the extensive investigation, and who would turn out to be responsible for Sabina's disappearance will follow in my later story. Sabina Nessa was an ambitious and charismatic young woman, with many plans for her life. But after one fateful evening, everything changed forever. All these terrible events took place in London. The city is the capital of the United Kingdom. It is a rich and diverse city known for its architecture, commerce, entertainment, and of course, tourism. In this story, we will focus on the Greenwich neighborhood, located south of the River Thames. And it is here, in London's historic neighborhood, that we meet 28-year-old Sabina Nessa. Before settling here, the girl lived in the county of Bedfordshire with a family who had emigrated from Bangladesh, hoping for a more comfortable life. The girl was one of 3 daughters of her loving mother. Her mother was fully occupied taking care of the house and children, while her father worked in a small restaurant. Although it was a stressful job for her father, Sabina's parents found free time to devote to their family and raising their daughters. As a child, Sabina was happy, growing up surrounded by care and love. The girl herself was sociable, very fond of animals, and often asked the family for more pets, which translated into the purchase of tropical fish or wavy parrots, not counting the 3 cats that already lived in the family. These are just memories from her childhood, but her parents remember how Sabina, as a child, was inseparable from her pets and gave them love. As Sabina grew older, she also grew to love being around people. She became interested in learning more about each person. After graduating from high school in 2011, Sabina decided to leave and attend the University of Greenwich to study sociology. In 2014, Sabina received her bachelor's degree and moved back to her family to get back on her feet and decide on her place in life. The young woman realized that her aspiration was to teach and, more specifically, to help young children. However, Sabina didn't want to limit herself to the UK and dreamed of going abroad in the future, which required a teaching degree, so she went back to the books. In 2020, Sabina graduated from Bethworth University and traveled to London to consolidate her teaching experience. The young woman got a job in an elementary school. She was loved by her students. There were 30 children in her class, ranging in age from 5 to 6 years old. Although she did well, the young woman dreamed that this experience would come in handy when teaching children in the Middle East. So Sabina worked, planned her life properly, and as a 28-year-old living in London, had a rich social life, often meeting her friends around Greenwich. September 17, 2021, Friday. The city was gearing up for another regular weekend, and Sabine had arranged to meet a couple of her friends at a local pub called The Depot, which was less than 10 minutes away from Sabine's apartment. London was not known to be one of the safest cities for a young woman walking alone, so Sabina was careful not to go out alone, especially closer to nightfall. In extreme cases, she stayed close to lighted places. There were 2 ways to get to the meeting place this time: go through the residential streets, or take a shortcut through the kiting park and then take the lighted main road. The thing was, Sabine had never liked the amusement park, and she felt uncomfortable walking through that neighborhood. But tonight she was running late, and the park was small, and it would only take a few minutes to walk past. On top of that, it was still light, and the sun hadn't dipped below the horizon. So at 8:30 p.m., Sabine put on her makeup, found one of her favorite dresses, and walked out of her apartment. Walked down the alley before entering the park, and meanwhile at the pub, Sabina's friends were waiting for her arrival. Sabina didn't show up on time, and even after her friends waited half an hour beyond the agreed time, the girl didn't show up. On top of that, she didn't respond to texts or phone calls. And this was unusual for Sabina, and the friends had no idea what to do. They decided that maybe she had something wrong and wouldn't show up at all. So they continued to have fun without her, because there was no particular reason to worry. It should be noted that Sabina was definitely determined to spend the evening with her friends. She even left her apartment and went in the right direction. It's just that she never made it to the meeting place. and it couldn't even occur to her friends that anything bad could happen to their friend during an 8-minute daylight walk in the center of England's largest city. Saturday, September 18th, started out like any other for most people in the leafy suburb of Greenwich. The weather was warm, mild, and the people were energized from the morning. Some went for a cowardly run. Some went for a walk with children who had been taken away for the weekend. Others were just enjoying the walk and the weather. One of those out for a walk was an identical man who was walking leisurely, enjoying the fresh air, when his dog started acting strangely amongst the tall grass at the edge of the park. The man walked closer to examine what had attracted the dog's attention and saw a man lying in the grass, covered by branches. Thinking that it was one of those who had drunk too much the night before and never made it home, the man called out to the lying figure, but there was no response. With some foreboding, the man moved closer to get a closer look to see what was there and saw a young woman lying in the grass beneath the translucent branches. Suddenly his vision focused on a large red spot on her head, and the man clearly realized that he was standing at the scene. He immediately stepped back and dialed 911 to report the discovery of a body in the park. Police arrived very quickly, closed the area to the public, and the body was quickly identified. Unfortunately, it was Sabina Nessa. The public was outraged upon hearing the news, as it was astounding to hear a murder in broad daylight, within walking distance of a home and in the middle of a park filled with visitors at that time. The news of the death of the daughter of Sabina's parents' daughter brought indescribable horror, but the family took it as another challenge in life and something that could not be overcome. Vigils were organized in the church for the next few days. People brought flowers and lit candles to the place where Sabina's body was found. Friends, family, the children Sabina had taught, much of the local community were in grief and despair, and these feelings of pain and anger gave authorities and investigators the impetus to find out what had happened to Sabina Nessa. The first step in the investigation that was launched was a call for the public to report to police if anyone saw anything strange or out of the ordinary on the evening of September 17, 2021. This included asking people to share CCTV and DVR footage from all cameras in the neighborhood. All of these submissions were checked, and the efforts were not in vain, as the police soon discovered some disturbing details. A surveillance camera was found showing a certain man walking through the square around the time of the alleged attack. This plaza was a road running next to a park. The footage shows the man holding an unknown object in his hand, looking around suspiciously. He then looks back, focuses his attention on something, puts on his hood and disappears from view. And shortly thereafter, a silver car is spotted on another camera. The man is suspected to be the owner of that car. Also during the search, 2 men aged 38 and 41 were arrested. However, during the proceedings there was a distinct lack of evidence, and so they were both released. But the latest CCTV footage was a great lead for the investigation, as it was possible to capture the suspect's face in the area where Sabina's body was found. On September 24th, 7 days after the murder, this camera footage was released to the public in the hope that someone would be able to identify the perpetrator. Shortly thereafter, the police received several anonymous calls. The callers said they recognized the suspect and gave his name as Becci Salamat, a 36-year-old gas station worker from Albania who lived on the south coast of England. Kochi lived 35 kilometers from where Sabina was found. So why was he seen near the park on Friday night? Expert analysis confirmed that the camera footage was indeed Kochi Salamat, and researching this information, he was tracked down to his apartment and arrested. Initially, Kochi refused to speak to police throughout the interrogation. However, when he was eventually charged with Sabina's murder, the man asked the question, "What will happen to me if I confess and tell everything?" We don't know what kind of deal was struck between Kochi and the investigation, but the man told us this. It was September 17th. Kochi checked in and checked into a room at a 5-star hotel located in Ispahan, which, oddly enough, was a 5-minute drive from where Kochi was renting an apartment. The staff here knew Kochi and knew he lived nearby, for the reason that his ex-wife Ianella, from whom the man was divorced, was currently working at this hotel. This was very disturbing and stressful for the staff, as Kochi would often hang around the lobby and seemed to be waiting for his ex-wife to show up. At the same time, the man did not deny himself the pleasure of ogling any other woman, be it a female employee or a hotel visitor, and made them feel uncomfortable. Ionella, the ex-wife, became increasingly concerned about Kochi's strange behavior. She wanted to reason with the man and agreed to talk to him in his car. This is where his main motive for booking the room became clear. Getting into the car with Kochi, Ionella was nervous because the main reason for their separation was violence and rudeness on the part of the man. The ex-husband had choked Ionella on several occasions, and at such times, he was clearly not himself. Still, the woman was determined not to let Kochi intimidate her and tried to calm him down during the conversation. Not listening to her persuasions, the man moved to the back seat of the car and suggested that Ionella make love. She refused as she was dumbfounded that he could even suggest such a thing, so she walked away, leaving him alone in the car. Kochi sat in the car angry and frustrated for a long time, but eventually moved into the driver's seat. He sped across the parking lot and disappeared from sight. The man never returned to the hotel or headed home. Instead, he traveled to London, where he hoped to wander the streets and find a woman to sleep with. In his opinion, he would achieve by any means necessary. After driving all the way from the south coast to London, Kochi ended up in Kitbrook, where he parked his car and walked into a local supermarket. Cameras captured the man buying a rolling pin and walking back to his car. His next actions were decisive but deeply flawed. In his frenzied anger, Kochi had to weigh up what to do next. It was necessary to calm down and deal with his emotions. But he decided to take out his anger on an innocent bystander. Swapping the rolling pin for a massive metal traffic triangle he pulled out of his car, Kochi headed to Pegler Square, where cameras captured him as he passed by. Looking to his right, he saw a young, beautiful Sabina Nessa, who unsuspectingly, without provoking anyone, was on her way to the park. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Kochi followed Sabina along the path of the park, speeding up his pace, and realizing that there were no passers-by around, ran after her. The girl heard the footsteps and turned to face her pursuer, but before she could get a good look at Kochi, he pounced on her with a folded traffic triangle. Kochi struck Sabina a total of 34 blows to the head and body before she collapsed onto a park bench. Grabbing the girl's collapsed body, Kochi dragged her to a nearby undergrowth where, after pulling off her clothes, he began strangling her and continued to do so until her heart stopped beating. After all these actions, Kochi hastily covered the girl's body with a few branches, collected the shards of his broken road triangle, wiped down the park bench and simply disappeared. Back at his car, Kochi drove off quietly, never to return to Greenwich again. Halfway home, Kochi stopped at a secluded spot and threw the emergency road sign into the river, hoping it would be lost forever. He then continued on his way and returned to the Grand Hotel in Sporn after midnight. Kochi was captured by a security camera as he headed through the lobby to his room. The next day, the man returned to his work in the garage and continued to live his life as if nothing had happened. That was until police knocked on his door. The autopsy could not give full results on the cause of the girl's death, but given the beating and strangulation, it can be assumed that this was the cause. While Kochi's attack was premeditated, the person he unleashed his wrath on was completely random, which is a horrifying detail because it cannot be stopped in advance. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to Sabina. She was simply the first single woman to cross his path, and she never stood a chance after that. While this assault was found to have a sexual motive, there was actually no evidence of sexual assault, just the removal of the victim's clothing. Was it an act of violence, pleasure, or just a game? Despite his confession, Kochi did not consider himself guilty, although he did admit that he was the one who killed Sabina. Kochi was held in prison until February 2022, at which point he was required to appear at a sentencing hearing where he was to meet his victim's family. Like most cowardly murderers, Kochi refused to appear at the hearing and chose to remain in his cell. And, by the way, he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. Sabina's family was furious with Coward for not showing his face and confessing his crimes in front of witnesses. As a result of his guilty plea, Kochi was sentenced to life behind bars with a minimum of 36 years for parole. We hope he never tastes freedom again, as he will need to reach the age of 72 to appeal for parole. Kochi brutally assaulted a young woman who should have felt safe, but alas, that safety was compromised. The attack sparked a citywide campaign to raise awareness on women's safety in London. This campaign handed out advice to women to encourage them to look out for each other and hold each other accountable where necessary. The Ness family, who were deeply saddened by the loss of Sabina, held a candlelight vigil and memorial service commemorating her murder. Her extended family continued to express their love and loss of a daughter, a sister, a teacher, a friend. Relatives and friends suffered great loss due to the temporary rage of an evil and foolish man. They lost a girl who had her own plans for her life, her studies, her personal happiness. And it's a pity that she didn't have a single chance to escape her fate. Thanks for watching. I recommend other true crime stories as well. Click right now. And also subscribe to my channel. See you soon.